So this is a question that I've been thinking about because I've been thinking a lot about particularly Death Stranding and The Last of Us Part 2, as well as Ghost of Tsushima. These three big games, the big three, I guess we could call them when it comes to the final PlayStation 4 exclusives that people are expecting to play before the PlayStation 5 comes out. Now we know that Sony is in a position where they're kind of dialing things down a little bit and getting everything ready for the PlayStation 5, for the announcement of it, and everything that they need to do for the next generation of consoles. That's obviously their main focus. And we know that these three games we're talking about here are very big games and very highly anticipated games, especially The Last of Us Part 2. So I just kind of started thinking to myself and asking myself the question, would anybody really care if these games ended up as PlayStation 5 launch titles? Now, I will say first and foremost that if all three of these games got pushed back to the PS5, that would be a huge problem. There's no doubt in my mind, because not only would gamers be upset because they were expecting to play them on their PlayStation 4, not to say that they wouldn't release on the PlayStation 4, but within that time frame, at least before the PlayStation 5 comes out, it would be a huge issue for Sony, because unless they have a couple of exclusive games that we're not aware about that would be ready to release by the end of 2019 and maybe at some point in 2020, I think that would be a huge problem with them, because they would have a huge gap to fill, right? So when I say this, just know I'm not talking about the idea of all three games launching on the PlayStation 5. I do not foresee that happening. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that I couldn't see them maybe making their way over to the PlayStation 5, considering how close they may launch to it. But I think it would be maybe safe to assume that at least one of these games, potentially two, but we'll just say one for now, could end up actually being a PlayStation 5 launch title. And I think the question is kind of important: would anybody care? And I would argue that no, I don't think many people would care. I think it does depend on which of these three games it would end up being. And by the way, I do want to say real quick that I apologize for constantly using the same PlayStation trailers in the background. I know that some of you guys are getting tired of seeing it, but I feel like if there's any video where it's appropriate to do so, it would be this one, where I'm specifically talking about these games. But I will try to make more of an effort going forward to put my own gameplay within the videos that I make. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. But getting back to the topic here, I don't think many people would honestly care. Now, a lot of us are expecting The Last of Us Part 2 to release in 2019. There are some things that we've went over that are hinting at this being the case, that are pointing at this being an actual possibility. A lot of people are thinking it's going to be a holiday 2019 release. So that would basically make Sony's 2019, we have Days Gone, Dreams, Dream Genie, and The Last of Us Part 2, a pretty solid lineup, especially when you think about the big hitters. Nothing against Dreams or Dream Genie, but the big hitters there would be obviously Days Gone and especially The Last of Us Part 2. So I honestly think, depending on when Sony would be planning to release the PlayStation 5, which I think it's most likely going to be a holiday 2020 timeframe, it would mean that Sony would need at least one game, potentially, to have to release within the first half of 2020, and then they could release another game alongside the PlayStation 5. Now, when you think about these three games, again, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, and Death Stranding, we have to think which of these games is the biggest. Well, I would say that The Last of Us Part 2 and Death Stranding are maybe on the same level, but I think maybe to some people The Last of Us Part 2 is higher, and maybe to others Death Stranding is higher. Nothing against Ghost of Tsushima, but it's just, there's just things that people are very, very excited to see what Kojima's next game is going to be after Metal Gear Solid 5, especially since this will be his first time deviating from that in a very long time and creating something completely new and fresh. And then we already know when it comes to The Last of Us Part 2 why people are so excited for this game. We know that this game is an absolute juggernaut, and I played The Last of Us, and anybody who has played The Last of Us, at least most people, can agree that it is one of the greatest games ever made, and it has some of the greatest characters ever, put out there, right? And people want to see what's next when it comes to that. Ghost of Tsushima does look good. It does look like it has a ton of potential. It is a new IP, but we don't know too much about it. We know that Sucker Punch is behind it. We know that they have talent, and we know that they're clearly trying to do something a little bit bigger with this game. So I think that out of all these games, the one that I could see end up becoming a PlayStation 5 launch title, if I had to just choose one, I think I would have to say Ghost of Tsushima, and I say that because this was the last game that was announced, I believe. I know that The Last of Us Part 2 and Death Stranding were both announced before Ghost of Tsushima, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I'm almost certain. And you just get this feeling with Ghost of Tsushima that it's maybe, it's taking Sucker Punch a while to really hone in on this game because they want it to be the best it absolutely can be. But here's the thing, though, that's important to understand. I think it could just as well be Death Stranding because Ghost of Tsushima has been in development for a long time. I think it's been in development ever since Sucker Punch finished Infamous Second Son. So if you think about that, that is a lot of time for them to be creating this game. But we know what Sony's mentality is now, and they want to give their studios as much time as they need to make sure that they deliver the product that they feel is the absolute best it possibly can be. And there's just really not much more they can do, or there's very little they can do that will impact the overall product in the end. So I think it would either be Ghost of Tsushima or Death Stranding. I think Death Stranding is just as likely because we know that Kojima likes to take his time with his games, and that he was starting from the ground up with his studio, Kojima Productions. We know that Sony most likely helped him in this endeavor, probably gave him some funding for sure, and to be honest, what he's been able to do so far with his team has been pretty phenomenal. He's had a very quick turnaround, and he's really landed on his feet. And, from what Sony has said in the past, I believe they said that they've never really seen a game of this scale created so quickly and efficiently. But we do know, based off of what Kojima's saying himself, that things are not maybe as far along as we were expecting. By that I mean, I think some people were anticipating the possibility of a 2019 release for Death Stranding, but that's looking less and less likely as we go forward. And when you think about The Last of Us Part 2 and Naughty Dog, they've been particularly quiet, and I believe a Naughty Dog developer came out, and I didn't want to make a video on this because it's not really significant news, but I'll just throw it in here, where somebody had said something, or there was some type of article published, I think kind of poking fun at the fact that, I don't know if it was poking fun, I think it was from The Onion, I don't know exactly. What I know is an article came out claiming that The Last of Us Part 2 was coming out in 2019, and a Naughty Dog developer responded to it, and all he really said is that, listen, we know people are very eager to see more of this game, and we will show it when we're ready. Now that could mean anything. That could mean, hey, you guys need to chill out, we're kind of a ways away from seeing any more of The Last of Us Part 2, or maybe the developer chose to say this because he knows that they are actually getting ready to show off something significant very soon, possibly another gameplay trailer or gameplay segment alongside the release date. Now, I've speculated that I think if Sony wants to make a huge impact at around the time of E3, when we know that Microsoft is going to have the show all to themselves, the best thing, in my opinion, for them to do would be to show another gameplay segment or significant trailer for one of these three games and announce a release date. And I think out of all three of these games, The Last of Us Part 2 is the most likely. I really think that if there's any game here that Sony really wants to try to get out before the PlayStation 5, to really just give a tremendous amount of momentum and keep that momentum going from the PlayStation 4 into the PlayStation 5's life cycle, and the best way to end the PlayStation 4's life cycle on the highest note possible would certainly be with The Last of Us Part 2. But that's not to say that I don't think that there's a chance, because there is. There is a chance, I think, that Sony may have the opposite mentality, or maybe they know what they have with The Last of Us Part 2, and they may just decide to give Naughty Dog even more time and say, you know what, we will make this a launch title with the PlayStation 5. Because the one last thing I want to mention here is you think about Microsoft, and you know Sony still takes Microsoft seriously. They have to. You know, they cannot get complacent. They cannot underestimate Xbox and their capability. And especially with what they're doing with Halo Infinite, there's a lot of buzz around Halo Infinite because it seems like Microsoft is really trying to have a special launch where they're going to launch the next generation of Xbox consoles alongside Halo Infinite. And, you know, I have my issues with Xbox right now, but there's no denying that that would be a significant move. So there's a chance that maybe Sony might want to take their biggest, hottest game, that being The Last of Us Part 2, and meet Microsoft right there with their biggest and hottest game with Halo Infinite at the launch. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine the PlayStation 5 launching with The Last of Us Part 2 and then the next generation of Xbox consoles launching with Halo Infinite? That would be pretty crazy. But I think anything is possible. And to kind of get back to the question of this video, would anybody care? I think the only time people would care is if 2 games got pushed back to the PlayStation 5. And only one game ended up launching. Although I would say if The Last of Us 2 ended up launching and it was that good, maybe people wouldn't be too upset about it. But there's no way all 3 of these games are going to get pushed back to the PlayStation 5. We know at least 1 to 2 of them are going to launch. It's just a matter of which ones. Now, I'm not saying that all 3 of these games couldn't come out before the PlayStation 5 launches, but again, you have to think about these titles and the weight that they have behind them, and they're pretty much juggernauts, especially The Last of Us Part 2. So you have to think when it comes to the strategy of keeping the momentum going and making sure you keep people excited while also, you know, wanting to continue PS4 sales, but thinking how you're going to have to sell people on the PlayStation 5. It's an interesting thing here. So I'm going to end the video here. I don't want to make it too long. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Would you care if any of these games ended up getting pushed back to be a PS5 launch title, and if so, let me know why, and also let me know which game you think would be most likely to have this happen. Be sure to leave the video a like if you did enjoy it, subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share the video out. On top of all that, it helps tremendously. But until next time, guys, take care.